Well, hey guys, we are close to finishing the chapter, or chapter 2 rather, of Philippians. We'll finish next week. Then I'm going to change these videos up a little bit. I want to make it more concise and direct, but we'll talk about that later. Today we're going to cover the reading of Philippians 2, verses 12 through 18. So let's go ahead and read it. So after you've read it, what is it that you notice in this passage? We go through a process for this. The first thing we do is you look for focus words, those words that are repeated. One thing that I noticed was the word work. It's repeated a few times in verses 12 through 13, or 12 and 13. God, day of Christ is repeated. It's an idea from earlier in this letter that Paul was talking about. And then the phrase glad and rejoice at the very end is repeated twice. You know, it's funny how just having those words right there can give us a very broad idea of what this passage ends up focusing on. Second thing we look at is statements about God. And in this, we see one, it says, God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. We're going to find that what is said there is very critical to this passage and critical to our lives. Then we look for transition words. Those kind of help us tie the passage together. The word therefore in verse 12 is very important. The word for at the start of verse 13 is important. That at the start of verse 15 is important. You probably found additional transition words, but I like to sort of draw attention to some of those big ones so we can talk about it as we go into understanding in our next video. Then we look for confusing statements, and there were a few, and I want this to be probably where your main focus is, because as we learn what these statements mean, we really learn what the passage is about. So what does it mean to work out your own salvation? That's going to be a big one. What does all things mean when it says do all things? Is this literally all things? What is all things? What is holding fast to the word of life? What is that about? What does that mean? And then this last, kind of close to the end of the passage, this phrase where Paul says, even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith. That's kind of weird language. What does that mean? And then last thing I want to point out from annotation, action words. And there are maybe two that we can look at. First is work, and work out your own salvation. That's something that can apply to the reader, because that's what we want to do. We look for action words. We want to look for action words that apply to the person who is reading it. And then be glad and rejoice at the very end of the passage. Once we've annotated, which as you practice this, it becomes so much easier. It becomes very automatic. It ends up taking a lot less time. And then it allows you to become better at the next part of Bible study, which is where we work out understanding the text by using various tools to do that. So we'll see you in our next video.